It's Tuesday, May 21st, and today I talk with Tommy Ryan about moving from Box to OneDrive, and we talk about sort of the reasons why you might want to look into doing that, sort of comparing the two products, a little bit of a discussion about that. And then it's really nice, we could walk through what are the three options that are out there for doing the migration, including using some of Microsoft's FastTrack services along with some of the tools that are out there. And then finally, just talking about manual migrations. Thanks and enjoy. Hi, and welcome to the Work Together Better podcast. This is your host, Danny Ryan. This is Three Wheels' official podcast about enterprise collaboration, how people, process, and technology combine to help organizations, departments, and teams work together better. Welcome to the Work Together Better podcast. This is your host, Danny Ryan. I'm here with my co-host, Tommy Ryan. How are you doing, Tommy?
I'm doing well. It's been a good crop at Iron Mountain Organics lately.
How's the chard?
It's good.
You had your second weekend?
Second weekend. And educating a lot of people on what good food.
So did you have more sales the second weekend or the first weekend?
Actually, the first weekend, believe it or not.
It had to do with the beer, Tommy.
Whenever you're serving alcohol, a lot of family members came.
Family members buying too. That helps as well. But yeah, you'll see some correlation between people buying alcohol and more sales.
Maybe
that's
we
why
should
people
sell
do that.
Alcohol and vegetables.
Hey, that could work. So today, on to the fun stuff. That was fun stuff. But the Box to OneDrive migration. So Tommy and I are continuing on in our discussions about moving from different platforms to Office 365. And so we've had several conversations about this. For a couple weeks, we focused in on social platforms. We talked about Workplace by Facebook and social platforms like that, and making the move over along with that Slack. And now we're into a new one here, what Gartner would call, content collaboration? What was I'll have to look it up here. Gartner calls it, I'm pulling up the report here, Content Collaboration Platform, CCP. So it used to be called Enterprise File Storage and something, but we're talking here primarily about document management, about storing content. And the one that we're starting off with here is going to be Box, and talking about Box. And I know we're also going to get to Dropbox as well in an upcoming podcast. But so we're looking at this primarily from the standpoint of migrating from Box over into we didn't say Office 365. This primarily is content's going over into OneDrive. Is that right?
Well, what's interesting to me is I think Box is kind of the combination of OneDrive and SharePoint Teams, maybe, because I think there are shared folders for collaboration that are not someone's personal folder that they're sharing out, but a team that is sharing a common set of files. I mean, similar to Dropbox, you have these shared files, you have an administrator that's kind of setting that up, but it's really not, Tommy's box, but it is a box location for a team or a project. So I think the easiest way to think about it is OneDrive, just because of the amount of functionality that has been traditional with Box, which has been more of a file synchronization technology, that in the more recent years, getting into more of the collaboration side that you see in teams working on files. So it's with all things, they're not a direct mapping, but I think in its early days, if it was more like a OneDrive because of the synchronization technology, but I think they're trying to position it more of team collaboration around files, which is not really OneDrive. OneDrive is one way to do it if you're owning a personal file, but if you're doing it as a team, that's usually a team site or a SharePoint site.
With SharePoint on the back end.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, I think, as we were looking at this as well, how Box is broadening out their story as well with some of the stuff with workflow and collaboration, some of their note-taking functionality, which it was sort of like they're positioned right now to sort of as a best of breed type of solution that fits very well into Office 365, and then they're also taking the position as far as they also have more than just the document storage piece of this as well.
Yeah, they have a strong emphasis around putting Box and Office 365 together. That's a better solution working together. And I think Box in its early days just had a very strong competitive advantage for being a very purpose-built file collaboration tool for cloud-based file storage. And the synchronization and technology that SharePoint had back in those days, it had something to be desired. And then that's Box kind of got in that space, and same with Dropbox. And now as people are looking at, well, I have a lot of these capabilities over on the Office 365 side. Do I need Box, to continue the type of collaboration I do and try to integrate it with Office 365, or do I just bring it over? I think that's the challenges that people are facing.
Yeah, this is, I think we did in prepping for this, we were looking at the license. We were trying to sort of, I think a lot of the stuff that we look at, we've done so many of the Jive migrations, and sort of like, is it a similar or how is this similar to that story, which is, there's some of this is like, why have two systems that do very similar types of use cases, and the overlap. And I think the issues that we've seen with customers has been, if you have multiple places where, for instance, you're storing documents, you run into the same reason why we did lots of integrations very early on with SharePoint, which was the search problem, the where do I share it problem, the security problem. Those sort of all come into play for us now when you have two different places where you're putting, in this case, documents. Yeah. And what would be addressed, if it was, if we were storing them just in Office 365, right? You really have to show, like, what's the value in having it outside. What does that present? Because there is, it looks like, and there's probably some use cases for Box, maybe on the security side of things, or some maybe the ease of use that give it an edge over OneDrive. But is it really so much that you want to have a totally similar solution, similar thing that is already provided to you within Office 365?
Yeah, especially when you're looking at the price comparison. You really look at what you get in their kind of entry level business versus closer to enterprise. You're comparing to the same pricing of licensing in Office 365. They're the E3 of Office 365 being, list at 20, and then their kind of midstream, business enterprise version is 25, and even goes up from there. So that's interesting to see, something that's just file sharing that only has a more recent workflow component and a more recent kind of collaborative document collaboration capability. You just kind of say, wow, they're kind of a little bit behind in some of those other technologies, but their pricing is not behind. Yeah, their pricing is lockstep, or maybe you could even say more expentive than
because you get so many other things in Office 365 as well. I mean, and there's just a it's more than just you're storing the content piece of this, or document piece of this. So there, that's there's a lot more to Office 365.
Yeah, and just let alone the kind of web content management. That you're trying to create an enterprise portal or area to do collaboration. Well, what is that home for Box except for, file locations or these notes? To have a cohesive story, Office 365 has such a strong foundation there to be that one-stop shop for collaboration versus having to piece together things. And they talk about the integration, and it's an enhanced solution when you integrate those two together. We all know that integrations are going to have some unnatural feel to it. There's going to be some jarring experience when you go natively in one of those platforms and then get linked over to the other platform, and it's different. As much as you try to, quote, brand it and centralize the theming of it, it's going to have different kind of UI behaviors that you're going to like one or the other. And then, like you were saying before, well, now where do I put things? Is it, if I like Box, do I put in Box? Or is there an organizational strategy to say these things are in Box, these things are in SharePoint?
Don't get me wrong. I'm all for like the best of breed idea of the, let's use the best tool for, and I see a lot of benefits to that. And the integrate there, but there are also, there's just so many, and there's, for some of the organizations, it's moves beyond, just the features and functionalities of the different platforms as well. I think a lot of our customers will keep other products around just to keep the vendors honest.
Right. When
pricing comes around. I mean, we got a little bit into this, and we were talking about G Suite, Office 365. Link that up, Austin. But there's just especially when you talk about larger organizations, or maybe what's interesting about this is we're talking about documents, primarily about documents here. Mm-hmm. And so with that, it's not like it's an application or something that is very unique, like line of business type. I'm sure you can build some solutions out of this, and they have metadata and are adding workflow and those types of things. But this is primarily, document and probably the metadata associated to that.
Very purpose-built. And if you think about what we do with Dropbox, we have a certain set of information we have in Dropbox because it's just simple, purpose-built. It does the trick. Yeah. And why change that? Unless you have some security concerns, unless you have price concerns of you're paying too much money to have that extra system. Yeah. But you're always going to find some diversity. And the neat thing about the cloud is that there is lightweight integration, to be able to, connect, from one system to the other. But it's not going to be a seamless, simple experience. It's gonna have some clunkiness to it.
I would argue that Microsoft's would be a seamless experience sometimes inside their own tools.
It's
because
hard
they
enough
have different
to do
teams
it when you own both the
they
tools.
Have different teams, So that is, you would think that's the overwhelming reason is the integration within the same company, but it's difficult. We're talking about software, ladies and gentlemen, and that's difficult to do. You have different product teams that are developing. Even with the new Microsoft, it's sometimes difficult for them to get their integrations in between products right. But you would think that you have a better chance with that. But so the next part of this, next part of the conversation where I wanted to go with this was if somebody is listening to this and they're looking at making the move, and we did a little bit of research just to hopefully to help folks out with this as they're looking at moving from Box over to Office 365. Like what are some of the options that are out there? And I think we ran into three. I'll call it three big ones. One is that one of the things that is out there that if you meet a certain criteria, like a certain number of accounts, and what Microsoft would consider for a program that they call FastTrack, and so FastTrack is Microsoft providing some services, a very sort of it's like a cafeteria type of offering. They'll do this and exactly that, and you can use that in order to do things like one benefit of FastTrack is data migration, and Microsoft calls out on their website, link to this, I'll show you where the link is, calls out on their website, what are the data migration offerings, and one of those offerings is is migrating from Box over to Office 365. And so that's probably, if you're using the FastTrack program, I would say take a look at what's available. They'll show you what can move, what they can't move. We also want to point out with that is, engage Microsoft for that. We have actually, Three Wheels helped out with those sort of as a because it's not going to do everything. We come in and help customers who utilize FastTrack services to do everything from like the communications piece of this to sort of all the different, because it's usually one facet of a larger a migration, or some people would call this a digital transformation, or how people need to move. So that's sort of one area. I just want to point that out, that if you are using FastTrack services, that you'll want to take a look at that.
Yeah, and I think depending on the characteristics of your environment, if you have things that kind of fall well within those guidelines, that there's only a few things that you have to handle, you really should consider FastTrack. And then sometimes there's situations where there's too many things that don't apply, and then the cost of integrating that quote free program with an overall program to do the migration, it's not worth the hassle.
Yep. The second option is this is something that that organizations have looked at. So there's tools that are out there. We ran into a couple of them, like Mover.io and BitTitan, and SkySync was another one. So there are products that are out there and tools that are out there that you can use to do this migration. Since we're talking about something that is, moving files from one cloud over to the other cloud, that there are tools that are out there. And again, whether you do that as an internal team versus engaging somebody like a Three Wheel to manage that, that's something that definitely, even if you need help to evaluate those tools to do that migration, that's we've just through the years have built up a lot of expertise around the different tooling that are out there for doing this types of migrations over to Office 365.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. And the air conditioning just turned off. I hope it turns back on. It's a little hot in here. The last one is just from doing these migrations through the years and working with lots of different types of clients is sometimes doing the manual thing is the right thing for certain folks. So, and especially where we're talking about documents here, and there's probably the chance of losing some of the metadata that is a part of those documents doing a manual migration. But I really think this is something that people can look at, either doing the option of hiring a consulting company or using an internal group to do a manual migration, but also the self-service option. Telling folks that you're migrating off by a certain date, and that if they want documents to move forward, giving them a self-service manual process that they can do to move the documents over to the appropriate places.
Yeah, and I think the thing that you can overlook in these scenarios of migrating is thinking about what is the future. What is your digital workplace within Office 365, and how do you have that organized, and how are you bringing on those services and helping your community find things easily, know how to create the things they need to do their collaboration. And if you're doing a migration and taking the structure that's over in Box and just plopping it over on the other side, you might miss some transformation opportunities and opportunities to kind of clean house, take out the cruft that builds up in these platforms, and really get it down to the essence of what's the core information that you want to move over. So when you're looking for it, it doesn't get cluttered with all this other information that maybe doesn't apply anymore to your organization. So I think that's one thing. No matter if you go manual to a full-blown end-to-end consultant managed migration opportunity, you really want to think about what's the future. And not overlook that because you miss an opportunity. When you migrate things, no matter if it's manual or you're paying someone to do that, it's expensive. And if you're going to make that move, you want to get the benefit And I've made this comparison before, is if you move and you don't do that work of understanding what should come, where it should go, and that seems like a simple thing to determine, but it's not simple when it comes down to it. You end up creating problems. You end up going backwards if you're not thoughtful about that. Even though maybe that new platform has nice new shiny things, you can easily go backwards if you're not thoughtful in terms of how you transform and clean that content in the process of migration.
Yep. Well, great. I hope this was helpful for people who are taking a look at migrating from Box over to OneDrive and in a bigger sense, Office 365. If you're looking at doing this, probably a great way to sort of get the conversation or continue on this conversation with us is we have an offering called a digital workplace briefing, and it just gives a chance for us to spend a couple of hours together, either if you're in the Atlanta area in person or if you're outside that virtually. It gives us a couple of hours to really focus in on the digital transformation that companies are going through and take a look at at what you want to do with Office 365 and how you really can get created into a place where work gets done. And so if you're interested in that, we are just come to the on our contact us page. We've got an option on that page just to say I'm interested in the digital workplace briefing. So that's a great place to go to if you'd like to continue on this conversation with folks like Pete Skelly who are in this day to day and want to continue on with this conversation. So definitely go take a look at that. And Tommy, thank you for taking the time to do this. And
you're welcome.
What do we have? What's next? Is it Dropbox next? So another content collaboration platform?
That works for me.
We'll do Dropbox next, so we'll pick back up with that. And I think we have a couple more that we're going after, and then that'll wrap up this series. And we'll probably look at adding some additional content to what we've got out there, and maybe doing some updates every once in a while as we hear, what people are really interested in doing and where some of these things get traction. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, customer experiences. What's the real world look like in these types of transformations?
Absolutely. So thank you, everybody, for taking the time to listen, and have a wonderful day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Work Together Better podcast. We're available on SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you're looking for a partner to help you craft a modern digital workplace on the Microsoft Cloud, please come by and see us at 3will.com. That's the number 3 spelled out, WILL.com. Thank you and have a great day.